we're going to be looking at how Jesus pwned logic. In other words, how to answer like Jesus. Now, the last video, we looked at two things. We looked at how Jesus always goes to God to determine ultimate truth and as the standard and the basis of objective reality. And the second thing he does is that he accurately depicts what other people believe. And then he uses that to address their objection or their complaint against him. Well, today we're going to be looking at the logical fallacy known as a double standard or known as special pleading, and how Jesus responds to people who have a double standard. Hopefully this will help you in your interactions with people as well.
Shout out to our guildies. Your support is much appreciated.
Now, before Jesus publicly started doing miracles and preaching and teaching, his cousin John was preaching in the wilderness, preparing people to prepare their hearts and minds for what Jesus would eventually be preaching, to prepare themselves for the kingdom of God, to prepare themselves for Jesus, the Messiah, this promised one who is going to come and who is going to baptize people with fire. John was baptizing with water. Jesus would come and do something greater that John was himself doing. Some people believed the preaching of John about Jesus and some people didn't. He went into the temple and he flipped the tables of the money changers, people who were robbing other people. So he was doing quite a lot of things in the public eye, okay? We could say he was causing a ruckus, right? He was getting attention. And this is what happened when he was doing this. He was then preaching within the temple, and the scribes, the Pharisees, the scholars, the intellectuals, the professionals of his day came up to him and they challenged him and they brought this objection to Jesus. By what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority? What they're basically saying is, who gave you the right to come in here and to cause this ruckus and start teaching people and start doing all these things? Who gave you the authority? Because we certainly didn't. What these people are trying to do by asking this question is they're actually trying to get Jesus in trouble. They're trying to get Jesus to say something that will turn the crowds against him, because Jesus was amassing a big following during this time. But Jesus doesn't answer them directly. He answers them with a question. Now, this is a really powerful way of answering someone, is to answer a question with another question. And this is what he said. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or was it from man? What's really great is that Matthew, the writer of the gospel, he gives us the inner dialogue of what the Pharisees and the scribes said as they were working out how to respond to what Jesus had brought up. If we say from heaven, he will say to us, well, then why did you not believe him? But if we say from men, we fear the multitudes, for they count John as a prophet. So they answered Jesus and said, we don't know. They refused to answer Jesus. And this is how Jesus responds to that. He says, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. These men wanted to ask Jesus questions, but they weren't willing to answer questions themselves. They were not willing to actually dialogue and have a conversation and to pursue the truth. They were trying to get Jesus in trouble. Jesus exposed that they had another motive, another agenda, by exposing that they had a double standard. Now notice, Jesus could have answered them. And Jesus did many times throughout the Gospels. He clearly spoke about how he came from God, how God was his authority. In fact, that was the theme of the previous video. These men were not willing to come to God. These men were hardened. Their minds and their hearts and emotions were against God. And this is what Jesus was exposing. This again was communicated in John chapter 3, where Jesus taught that men must be born again. They must be born from above. God must transform the individual so that their hearts are changed and their hearts are softened and humbled to receive the things of God and not resist Jesus and what he was doing. So in the comments below, can you let me know of an example of when you have been in a similar situation where someone has asked you a question, but they haven't actually been seeking an answer? Well guys, I hope you found that helpful. Please consider sharing this, because if you found it helpful, I'm sure someone else will find it helpful as well. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you know exactly when we go live, so you can interact with some of the cool things we are doing. Could you please consider joining the Armoury Guild? Link is in the description for more information there. That would greatly help support what we're doing here. God bless you. I'll see you next time.